Welcome everyone to the 11th Annual America's Got Regulatory Science Talent Competition. I'm Tina Morrison. I'm the Director of the Office of Regulatory Science and Innovation. You'll hear me say ORSI several times. That's the acronym for our office. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to share a few words with you all about the importance of this competition and to congratulate our 11th annual winners. Before I do that, are you advancing the slides for me? Awesome, thank you. We are especially thankful to host the competition in person this year. Of course, that hosts a series of other challenges. Apparently, the new audio system in this room is really sensitive, so if you're whispering even, the folks on the phone might be able to pick that up. We experienced that last week at a leadership meeting, which was kind of fun. Several other things. There will be a Q&A following each of the students' presentations, and the Q&A will be moderated by Drs. Bentley and Adamo. Okay, let's move forward. So first and foremost, we'd like to thank, of course, the FDA mentors who supported the teams. Without their mentorship and guidance, I'm not sure the projects would be as successful as they are, so thank you all for that. And next, we'd like to also thank the FDA judges who reviewed and scored all of the projects. That's on the next slide, thanks. So thank you all for your time and energy on that. In addition to special thanks to the leaders of the programs at each of the institutions, I'd like a special thanks to Tracy Chen for working with Bill and Joan on organizing this event, not only making sure the competition went smoothly and helping with judges and mentorships, but also helping to organize the in-person event. So I think we really need to take a moment and give her a round of applause for that. And you'll have to pardon me while I read from my notes to make sure that I stay on track today, because I tend to very easily veer off. So as a director of ORSI, an office that supports and serves the FDA chief scientist and the office of the chief scientist here at FDA, and the regulatory and research scientists across the agency, it has been really rewarding to see all of you, bright young minds from the University of Maryland and the University of Rochester, to apply tools to advance regulatory and science challenges that we face every day. So thank you for that. This competition is especially important to our organization because it helps to demonstrate how science lies at the heart of everything we do at FDA. First, the competition enables us to emphasize efforts in this unique field of science, regulatory science, which ideally is taking outputs from science, applied science and translational science, and turning them into tools, standards, methodologies, approaches that we can use to help assess FDA products. And those tools are used both by FDA and its stakeholders from industry. And many of those industry small businesses come from academia. Second, this contest showcases how science is at the foundation of the work that we do, our decisions and our successes. FDA's ability to make the most informed, effective, predictive regulatory decisions depends on our understanding and application of the best available science. Third, this competition spotlights the incredibly broad range of scientific disciplines FDA calls upon to carry out its mission. So I'm going to quickly walk you through this graphic. It's really important that we understand that there are unique challenges and different perspectives when we talk about scientific needs from the agency. So if you can slowly click through each one, LaToya. First, we can do that. We can look at challenges science needs from the product areas and the different products that we regulate at FDA. We can do that by looking at, next please, the different populations that we serve, whether it's minority populations, pregnant persons or lactating persons, for example. Next, please. We can also look at science needs when it comes to public health emergencies. One second. Yeah. Folks on the line, can you please make sure you're muted? Thank you so much. We can also take into consideration public health emergencies like the opioid crisis that we're facing. And one of the commissioner's new priority areas, misinformation and disinformation. And lastly, another perspective is the cross-cutting scientific perspective, meaning looking at regulatory areas of science that impact multiple centers and offices across the agency. And what we're trying to do here in ORSI is to really look at this latter approach. Next slide, please, LaToya. And organizing it into a new focus areas of regulatory science framework. Please one click, thank you. This is where we're trying to take the foundation of FDA's mission to protect and advance public health and really understand all the different areas of regulatory science that fit into 3 charges. That's to modernize the development and, modernize the development and evaluation of FDA-regulated products, to strengthen post-market surveillance and labeling of FDA-regulated products, and lastly, to invigorate public health preparedness and response of FDA, patients, and consumers. And so taking this framework, on the next slide, you'll see the winners from today's competition touch upon 5 different areas of these regulatory science areas. And I won't read those here today because you're going to hear the exciting presentations from those students. Whereas last year, we've had those presentations recorded and available on our website. So today we get to hear them live, and I'm really excited for that. Okay, so fourth, this competition continues to play a vital role in training and fostering our next generation of scientists, creative thinkers and problem solvers that we need to ensure we can continue to protect and advance public health and encourage innovation. And lastly, this competition underscores the criticality of teamwork and finding innovative solutions to tough public health challenges. And we all play a part of that enterprise of regulatory science because it can't be carried out by one entity alone. Collaboration is at the heart of what we do at FDA, both across the agency and working alongside our stakeholders. And it's the bright young researchers like you who have the ambition, confidence, and curiosity to go after innovative approaches and change the future. And the CERSI program, which is one of ORCI's flagship programs, is an important collaboration between FDA and academic institutions aimed at advancing projects that promote regulatory science, cutting-edge research, education, and scientific exchange. And one of those programs is hosted by the University of Maryland. Thank you, Dr. Bentley, for participating. And we also partner with the NIH's National Center for Advancing Translational Science, and the University of Rochester hosts one of those programs. Thank you, Dr. Adamo, for working with the students. Both institutions voluntarily promote the robust and collaborative research and educational programs we require and support many of the training needs for FDA, like the Regulatory Science Research Hub that's hosted through the CTSA. All of the ideas that the inventive students present today will demonstrate precisely what this competition and FDA are all about, driving innovation through collaboration and using cutting-edge science to develop novel solutions to public health challenges. So my message to the students: I certainly hope you don't rest on the successes you've achieved today. Please continue to engage with FDA staff. Winning this competition is just the beginning. We need you to continue to develop new, exciting, and effective scientific solutions for a world that is changing more rapidly than we could have ever imagined. And please continue to serve as a regulatory science ambassador, whether you join the FDA or some industry partner or continue your journey at the academic institutions. So before closing, again, I'd like to thank Bill and Joan for your commitment to supporting your students and the science priorities at FDA. To the ORCI staff who supported Tracy in serving as escorts and helping to make this in-person event possible. And lastly, to the America's Got Regulatory Science Talent Competition winners. Thank you for your insightful work. I hope to continue to follow your path of discovery with passion and ingenuity that we hope to see today and throughout your careers. So please don't hesitate to reach out to our office if you need support from us. And with that, we would like to hear a few words from FDA's Chief Scientist, Dr. Namandje Bumpus.
For some reason, even though I'm coming to the microphone, they always put my picture up still. Like everybody can see me live, but they like to remind me, I guess. All right, so thanks everybody so much for being here. It's really a pleasure to get an opportunity to learn about your work and what you've been doing. So I, August 1st, started at FDA as a chief scientist, so I'm still within my first year. And certainly I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Morrison and the rest of the team in ORCI, and they do extraordinary work. And in addition, within the Office of Chief Scientist, we really have a broad scope of areas that we encompass. We have research laboratories in Arkansas, the National Center for Toxicological Research. We have lab safety. We have scientific integrity, professional development. So really a broad mandate. But a large part of my work is trying to find opportunities to connect our scientists, to bring them together increasingly in teams like you all to work together and also to communicate the work that we do at FDA more broadly. And to, in general, I think, help the public get a better understanding of the methods that we use in science, how science really does underpin our decision-making in regulatory science. Before I came to FDA, I was a faculty member at Johns Hopkins, so just down the road from some of you. I was at Johns Hopkins Medicine for 12 years. And my lab was a HIV drug discovery and drug development lab. We did a lot of work in pharmacology, molecular pharmacology. We developed molecular methods. And central to what we were doing was really trying to advance public health through this molecular pharmacology lens. Before that, I was a grad student at University of Michigan, undergrad at Occidental College, and a postdoc at the Scripps Research Institute. And as I was thinking about today and looking at your projects, what you worked on, I think that you are so far ahead of where I was as a student in that you're already thinking about your broader public health impact. The projects that you're working on, everything from thinking about real world evidence, which is really important at FDA, something we're trying to move forward. So I see that there's really exciting work and thinking in that space, thinking about diversity, aging, populations, AI, looking at apps. Now, some of that, of course, was beyond technologically what I could do back when I was in school. But even the fact that you're at a place where you're trying to apply your work, your learning, to have that broader, deeper impact on public health, and you're doing it in teams, which is so increasingly important to science, I think is extraordinary. So I would say, as Tina mentioned, certainly we don't want you to stop here, but there's a lot you can do. You all, I think, have a lot of opportunity to really make a difference in public health and really transform things. I hope that some of you will consider FDA as a future career. Maybe one of you will be in this spot and could be chief scientist. But even if it's not FDA, somewhere where you are able to use all of this expertise that you have, your vision, your originality of thought and creativity that you've shown here to advance public health. One place where I think I can also use your help as folks who are savvy and creative and have this understanding is, Tina mentioned, we're thinking about mis and disinformation and how we can really make sure that we're getting the best information around science out to the public. The more that you can, for instance, talk about your project to not only folks in your broader family and community, but even getting it out there as much as you can to the public, the broader community, I think is really important for them to see the process and see the work that you're doing. There are a lot of people that will receive things in a certain way coming from you, of course, when you're talking about it as your own work. And I think even more generally, the more that you can try to get out there, just your understanding around topics of science is certainly helpful. So I hope that that's something that we can partner together on that communication. So with that, thank you again for all of your work. I'm very impressed by the work that all of you have done, and we certainly do view you as the future of regulatory science. And just keep it up. I think your trajectory is very steep, and so just keep going, and we're certainly here to support you through your career in any way that we can. So thanks.
I see what Tina's talking about. A little awkward. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear. So first, so I'm Bill Bentley. I've been involved in this since the start. And but before I get anywhere, are some of the advisors from FDA here? Your names were up and judges. Are some of those folks here? So. Okay, raise your hand when you're online. We can't see you, but in any case, want to certainly thank you so much. Your role is pivotal in helping the students and making this a reality. So I'm going to take 2 seconds, not too long, give you a little bit of historical perspective. I'm sure the students don't know, and maybe some of the folks at FDA don't know the origins of this, and I have to make mention because this is Jim Pauly's brainchild, and he's the one that really deserves the comments that I'm going to make. So the CERSI program was initiated when Commissioner Margaret Hamburg was the commissioner and Joshua Sharfstein was, I think, deputy. And when we first had this is over a decade ago, when we first had those initial formative meetings about what is the Center of Excellence in Regulatory Science, and I will say this also for those that don't know, the first two CERSIs had to be within 50 miles of the FDA. And so we were one and Georgetown was the other. But one of the things that was very clear in the remarks of Doctors Hamburg and Scharfstein was the urgency of socialization of regulatory science. You know, and what Tina just said and what Dr. Bumberg just said is so important for us as a community, the academic community, to get out there and let people know that the FDA is an entity that works on science and we can contribute in that. And so it was very important for Jim and I to figure out ways in which we could promote this kind of activity. By and large, what we do is research with and for the FDA. But the other part of what we're doing is doing that research with people that are going to get out there. You're going to get out there, you're going to lead the charge, you're going to work in the Pfizers and the Amgens and the Medtronics. You're going to maybe work at the FDA, and all of that actually needs to be stimulated. And that's why Jim came up with this talent competition. And so thanks to Jim for doing this. It's also the highlight. So we've been co-PIs of the Maryland CERSI for a decade. It's also really the highlight of our year. Most of the times we're working with our faculty and students at the universities, both campuses, but this is genuinely a real highlight. And so congrats to all the students, previous students as well as future students. So one of the things I appreciated Dr. Morrison's slide, the previous slide, that had all the topics. I think we probably, if you look at 10 years worth of competitions, we might have touched on almost all of those. So thanks to all of you for thinking about new topics and so on, and you can obviously see where you're plugged in. So I think I've already given my entire comments. You can go to the next slide. Right, we've done this one. Go to the next one. Okay, so I think it's, so these are the folks from Maryland. I think I'm supposed to start by introducing our teams, right? That's the idea. Okay, so we're going to go one at a time. Dr. Chen fortunately put these up in order. And so with that, let's just kick it off. So the first team, first place team from the University of Maryland. Unfortunately, from College Park, we didn't have any of the winners. We've had winners in the past, but I think it's like 80-20%. So Jim always gets out the vote, for example, and you guys have a biased situation. In any case, clinical lab scientists. The captain is Duran Dasi, Peyton Liebhart, Rebecca Collins, and Marilyn Beckema. Your title, your topic here, short-term regulations for laboratory-developed tests to prevent patient harm from tech startup companies, such as one that was just in the news a couple days ago. Okay, you guys come on up.
Are we using the?
Oh, yeah.
Hello. Good morning, and thank you for having us. Are we starting the presentation? Okay. Can we have the slides, please? Thank you.
It's a lot more difficult to sit behind over there.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm Duran Dasi, and we are the laboratory team clinical laboratory sciences. And we talked about our presentation was about laboratory developed test regulations, lesson from Theranos. And I have Peyton, Rebecca, and Marilyn. So I'll let Rebecca start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And we were assisted by our faculty advisor, Ivana Vucinic, as well as our FD advisor, Julian Carvalho. You can head to the next slide. All right, so a little bit of background about Theranos, sort of the flame that sparked this whole candle. It made claims of it was a startup in Silicon Valley by 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes, who was a Stanford dropout, Our company made claims about revolutionizing medicine using their nanotainer technology and a single drop of blood to run a panel of chemistry tests on their Edison analyzer. They were able to operate for over 15 years before being shut down later on by the FDA. During their years of operation, many patients was caused harm because their equipment could not operate as well as stated. They classified their device as a laboratory developed test, LDT, which is how they were able to bypass a lot of the lab certification processes as well as validated peer review data that may have been required for typical laboratory tests. So laboratory tests, also known as in-house or homebrew tests, are low-level complexity tests produced and manufactured and operated by a single laboratory, usually within a specific community. They are utilized to meet analytical needs of a specific area where an FDA test might not be available or compatible with whatever equipment the lab currently uses. Over the years, there has been a growing level of complexity for laboratory developed tests, which is why more regulation is needed for them. Okay, next slide.
So there have been quite some events, amendments, documents that have come forward towards the regulation of laboratory developed tests. But on the table, we have just a few of them. I'll talk about just a few. So in 1976, we had the FDA had the medical device amendment, which was enacted for the food from the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So under this act, it classified medical devices. It gave FDA full enforcement for regulating medical devices. And laboratory developed test falls under medical device, but the FDA has this laissez-faire towards the regulation of laboratory developed testing. And in 1988, we had the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment, CLAR 88 for short. So this CLAR 88 takes care of all the compliance, regulatory issues when it comes to laboratory testing. But so far, they're doing a good job, but realizing that despite all their effort, we still have a lot of non-compliance, a lot of gaps in regulatory issues when it comes to laboratory developed testing. The FDA in 2014 put forward 2 publication guidance documents. One of them was the draft guidance for industry, food and drug administration staff and clinical laboratories, which talk mostly about regulatory oversight for laboratory developed testing. And the second one talked more about FDA notifications and medical device reporting for laboratory developed testing. So all these efforts was such so that the FDA could try to gain more oversight in regulation for laboratory developed testing, because they realized that there are quite a lot of non-compliance issues, like Theranos, for example. So they try to see how they could get more involved and maybe limit their laissez-faire that they had initially put forward. And also, given the fact that looking back in 1976, where they had the Medical Device Amendment Act, laboratory developed testing has quite changed from how it used to be. Initially, during that period, most LDTs, for short, were in-house testing, which tested just a local population. Fast forward to today, where you have interstate commerce of these LDTs, which test patients from across states. So the FDA has tried to look into that and try to see what they can do to get more control over the regulation, to add more control over it, to see how they could limit all this non-compliance and issues like Theranos. And in 2002, they put forward the introduction of the Verifying Accurate Leading Edge IVCT Development Valid Act for short in Congress. And with this act, the FDA hopes that they can have more control over LDTs.
As Duran previously stated in the previous slide, the VALID Act was originally introduced in 2020 and then with some revisions again in 2021. So it is known now as the VALID Act of 2021. It's a great start for the FDA to begin regulating in vitro diagnostic testing. And they would do so using a risk-based framework that is similar to the framework that they use to regulate other medical devices. Next slide, please. As you can see here, it's an overview of the legislative process that a proposed bill must take in order to become effective law. The VALID Act is still currently in the beginning stages, even after 3 years after it was introduced, which means that it can be years until it actually becomes an effective law. In the meantime, another Theranos can emerge, and so we propose some short-term regulations that could be put in place in order to protect patients from potential harm.
Next slide, please. So in conclusion, how could we have prevented Theranos from happening? Our fearless leader and advisor, Dr. Vichenik, always emails us newspaper articles. So we always have a lot of tech companies out of Silicon Valley are still in the business of coming up with innovative laboratory solutions. We're not against innovation and new ideas, but we want to make sure that there's minimal patient safety issues. You know, patient safety is everyone's responsibility. So we're thinking, how could the FDA have prevented Theranos from happening and also prevent those in the pipeline? Because for all we know, there might be another one happening. As Peyton and my colleagues so eloquently discussed, the long-term solution will be the VALID Act. The VALID Act will be regulation that would regulate these laboratory-developed tests. But as you all know how Washington, D.C. works and the Congress and the Senate, we don't know when that regulation will become law. So in the meantime, what can we do? We just can't sit and wait for another Theranos. Patients were impacted, investors lost money, and just general, not a good situation for everyone involved. So what can we do in the meantime, and how can the FDA use their current regulation to prevent another Theranos from happening? So we propose short-term solutions that we could do in the meantime while waiting for the long-term solution. So we are recommending that we leverage current regulatory situations in place, systems in place. So as you all know, the lab is a highly regulated department. I think after pharmacy in most clinical situations, the laboratory is the next regulated department. So we're saying that those quality systems already in place through CMS and CLIA should be used to regulate these LDTs, although they're not being regulated. As Diran said, in the past, they were not really regulated. The FDA did not really want to get involved. But right now, today, it's become more complex than it used to be, and there is the need because there's so much patient impact. Also, Dr. Morrison, I think, talked in her presentation, innovative ways to do regulation. So we are recommending that manufacturers can seek FDA feedback earlier in the process rather than later. So we could use some of those innovation ways to get involved earlier in the process so that data can be reviewed and they can make changes without undue regulatory burden. And also, we're recommending that third-party pre-market review programs might be expanded to include these LDTs. We're also encouraging, the FDA, I think, has written a couple of guidance and put out their thoughts, but I think it's not been published. So we're encouraging the FDA to publish the review memorandum that they did for LDTs. And then also a flexible policy to certain class 1 devices, which will be the class that these LDTs fall under, to be flexible for them to make adjustments without undue regulatory burden. And then also, I think Dr. Morrison or Dr. Bumpy talked about to encourage the public. So definitely we are recommending that the public should be engaged so they can use like patient acts, FDA, the public, because they are the ones being impacted and realizing that there are issues. So we can encourage the public. So we definitely agree that the public should be involved. Next slide, please. And so in a conclusion, while waiting for the VALID Act to be enacted into law, this short-term solution should definitely be looked into to prevent whoever is in the pipeline, the next Theranos, from happening. Thank you.
I think we have time for a couple questions if there are any. I think there's people online too, right?
Yeah. I definitely have a couple questions.
Okay.
All right. So
your recommendation is to, if I understood, was to actually try to enforce the regulations on the laboratories instead of the device. Is that right? That was your first recommendation?
So most of these laboratories, I think for Theranos, it was the state that went in to investigate and then they shut down the lab. So these, the state, in all of these states, the state or COLA or the FDA or all these regulatory bodies that are out there that have deemed status that go out and perform inspections, they might, usually when they come in, they don't look, they only look at, you know, the regulatory tests. They might as well just look at LDTs because they're there. So they might as well just look at it to see if there's anything that stands out. That was the recommendation.
I have a couple other questions.
Yes, please.
I was in medical devices for 12 years, so this is a place that's close to my heart. So in thinking about incentives, so you said encourage manufacturers to come to talk to the FDA. If they're doing things under the curtain that maybe are not legal, what is really an incentive for them to come and talk to FDA early, right? They're not, in fact, they probably completely want to avoid talking to FDA early. So how do we incentivize companies making those products to actually come and talk to us early? What are some ideas you guys have?
I can take it.
Oh, yeah,
Go
go
ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna say, probably in the earlier stages have a little laxer policies for what is being reviewed. I know because of patient safety, the requirements and all the documentation required for the whole process is very intensive. But even though they're doing it under their table, they might not feel like they have to. If the earlier stages, they can get whatever documentation they have reviewed earlier on. I don't know if that makes sense.
Just to add a little bit, throw more light on what Rebecca is saying, and also picking up from what Maryland said. So if the FDA, for example, try to work in close partnership with some of these laboratory bodies that already regulate laboratories, for sure, then it becomes an obligatory responsibility for the laboratories to do those things. It's a form of indirectly trying to motivate, yes, like foresight that this is something that you're obligated to do. And also laboratory developed testing, some of them can be real complex. Some of them could just be like maybe introducing a new specimen type for an already approved FDA instrumentation. So if, for example, these testings are classified, maybe category 1, 2, 3, according to how some of the instruments are classified, where maybe a class 1 instrument would just be like a registration, and it makes it quite easy for the lab to just, all I need to do is list the test. So it kind of motivate the lab as well.
I think Dr. Martin, I think she had, did you have a question? Okay, sorry, thought you raised your hand. Okay.
I hope those answered the question.
Good ideas. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So it's also interesting to see how over the course of the years, the student groups like to challenge the FDA, but it's always interesting to hear the FDA response as well. And particularly appreciate that everybody's on the same page about patient health and the whole mission. So I think that's the genesis of what we're doing. So our second place team is Magic RX. So I'm an engineer, so the last two teams here, the second two teams have RX, that's not my game. But in any case, congrats to the second place team, Godwin Okoye, John Ritzk, Udim Damachi, and Bernard Bright and Davies Payee. Your title is Increasing Diversity and Real-World Evidence, Generation for Newly Approved Alzheimer's Disease Drug, lecanemab. And that's, for somebody my age, it's pretty important. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Udim Damachi, and I'll be starting the presentation for the Magic RX app group. Before proceeding further, I'll just introduce the group members. In our team, we have Godwin, John Rissick, and Bernard. So Today, we will be proposing a solution to increasing the diversity and real-world evidence generation for the newly approved Alzheimer's disease drug, lecanemab. Next slide, please. So for our presentation today, we'll be talking, like I already gave a brief introduction of our team members, and then I'll talk briefly about why we decided to select the area we chose, and then John will go ahead to give a background and a flow diagram for our proposed intervention, while Godwin will talk a bit about our solution, and then Bernard will finalize the presentation by talking about our long-term goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so for this, the highlighted statement is the area we decided to pick for our presentation today, because as we all know, when it comes to approval of new products into the market, FDA relies solely on clinical trials, but there's certain limitations when it comes to clinical trials where, first of all, they have really strict eligibility criteria for individuals to actually participate in the clinical trials. And secondly, the population in the clinical trials are usually completely different from the population in the real world that gets to use the product the clinical trial was performed for. So which brings us to the reason why we feel that it's necessary for FDA to continuously collect real-world data from people in the population who actually get to use this product.
Thank you, Udom. We're going to go to the next slide. So lecanemab was awarded accelerated approval on January 6, 2023. And sorry, that should be 2023. And it was granted approval for a specific Alzheimer's population, which included patients with early Alzheimer's disease, defined as patients with mild cognitive impairment or mild dementia. And the drug should be administered through an intravenous infusion in a doctor's office. So the clinical trial that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine showed that lecanemab is able to slow cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's disease, and that was measured by a change from baseline at 18 months in the score and the clinical dementia rating sum of boxes. The trial consisted of 1,795 individuals and ran over 18 months. And one thing we realized from this trial, and that was the talk of the news and blogs, was the very restrictive inclusion criteria of the trial, which was also a problem in the approval of a previously approved drug last year, aducanumab. The trial, we know from the literature, and everyone who works in the field knows that people who enroll in clinical trials are usually people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. But this trial showed us that only showed us an underrepresentation in certain racial and ethnic groups. For example, only 2.3% of the people participating in the trial were Blacks. And bearing in mind that Blacks are twice more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease in the course of her lifetime compared to whites. 48 individuals, only 48 individuals were Black, and 20 of these 48 were actually randomized to the treatment group, whereas the other 24 were randomized to placebo. The drug is priced at $26,500 a year. And given that the drug was only awarded accelerated approval, confirmatory trials are required. And we know that these trials take up to 9 to 10 years to confirm effectiveness and ensure safety. And another issue with this drug, which was also similar to aducanumab, was a higher incidence in intracerebral hemorrhages, which can only be detected using some kind of scanning like MRI. Next slide, please. So we identified two problems here. The first one is the lack of diversity in RCTs, specifically related to race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status, and insufficient evidence to ascertain effectiveness. So there is a need for more timely evidence, faster evidence, and waiting for 9 to 10 years for these confirmatory trials to be completed is not feasible. What we know from the literature is that people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are less likely to enroll in RCTs. And another important finding that we saw reported in the literature is that people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who use internet connection, who use internet, are more likely to use mobile apps, more likely to use their phones for full internet access compared to those who make more than 100,000 a year. So what we're saying here is that people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to use other devices other than phones, like laptops or other devices. So what we propose a mobile app called Magic RX that can help, hopefully, help us with this problem. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we're going to develop a web-based mobile app that we believe can be managed by a third-party organization such as the American Alzheimer's Association, who's very well known to immensely support patients with Alzheimer's disease and their families. The app, the main purpose behind this app is to collect demographic and clinical characteristics that are not usually captured and reported in your typical table 1 of a randomized clinical trial, or your or data that is submitted to regulatory bodies. We're going to use patient-reported outcomes that are already validated and have been used previously to measure improvement in Alzheimer's patients. And by that, we believe that we can increase racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic diversity, and by the same token, accelerate data collection and get more timely answers to our questions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so we propose that this app be directed by the providers, such as the doctors in the hospital. And these doctors can introduce this app to like the patients, for patients who still have their cognition intact. And for those patients whose cognition has slowed considerably well, we propose their caregivers to be in charge of the app so that the interaction continues with both the provider and the patient community, which puts the interest of these patients first. And so we are looking at the American Alzheimer's Association, just as John said, to manage the data being collected and stored in a database that can be used by the FDA to ascertain if this app is worth it for mainstream real-world evidence generation. It's also worthy to note that our app is going to be patient-centered, and we hope to make it as user-friendly as possible. Next slide, please. And so this is the interface of our app. First, we have like the sign-up information, which would we would have like the navigators, which could be the caregivers, help these patients sign up, and then we proceed to collecting their demographic information, such as their race, date of birth, annual income, and then we proceed to the questionnaire, which is going to be like pre-validated instruments to measure patient-reported outcomes, and have some components for clinical outcomes assessments, where we have like the providers look at certain measures that could determine if people who ingested lecanemab, people who were administered lecanemab, if they have like improved cognition or other markers that would show that the drug is actually as effective as the clinical trial explains. So with that, I'm going to hand over to the last speaker today, Bernard.
Thanks, Godwin. So yes, we propose Magic RX to help increase diversity in real-world evidence generation that we hope will improve the care for people with Alzheimer's disease. And we are looking at the long-term effectiveness of lecanemab, which will in turn also will improve the racial diversity in the data that is generated. So we propose that our app will run concurrently with confirmatory trials. That will generate real-world data that can be used to complement the data that will be generated from clinical trials. We anticipate that quality of health measures will be generated and will be collected after initiation of the drug. And that data is not usually collected in trials, particularly the Alzheimer's drug trial that has taken place so far. In implementing or deploying this app, we hope to be very transparent because we're going to include all our patients, all the stakeholders in a development process to make sure that our app is truly patient-centered, is user-friendly, and then the uptake also will be good. And then we anticipate that during the data management process, we're going to comply with HIPAA regulations and then make the app accessible to everybody who has Alzheimer's. Please, next slide. So one potential limitation of our app will be that we will not be collecting safety data initially, and then there is also a potential of lack of buy-ins. But because we're going to make sure that we engage all the stakeholders, including funders, FDA, and then the patient group, we anticipate that that will help people to take up the app, because literature has shown that if health technology that are developed with the involvement of all stakeholders have better uptake than those that are done without the involvement of those stakeholders. So in summary, we are proposing Magic RX, a patient-centered app that will collect information to increase diversity in participation in real-world evidence generation to improve the effectiveness of lecanemab, and then to be able to help us assess the long-term effectiveness of the drug among our patient population. With that, thank you for listening to us.
Time for a couple questions? No, I certainly do. Right after that.
Yeah, so you said that the app is available for anyone who gets a prescription of lecanemab. Will the questions change over time depending on how their Alzheimer's progresses? So as it gets more severe, will there be like different levels of questions? Will it be flexible to where they are in the seriousness?
I can answer the question. Yeah, so because we are planning to standardize these questions, we expect to have the same questions throughout, so that we make sure that we don't create some kind of bias when it comes to the kind of questions we are asking people with Alzheimer's disease that receive lecanemab.
Additionally, we're going to be collecting clinical data as well. So, and the data will be accessible to other stakeholders. So for instance, your provider can have a limited access, so the doctors can also look at the data. There's going to be a dashboard that based on the level of access that we provide you, you'll be able to see. So if, let's say, a patient that is on the app, it's the information that has been generated over time, the doctor will have access. So if your symptoms are getting worse, your doctor can be able to pick it up and then treat you accordingly.
Is there anything you plan to do to incentivize the engagement? Because you may face the same problems as they face with the recruitment. That you may have underrepresentation because of cultural.
Yes, that's a great question. I'm gonna get closer to the mic. I think we can offer incentives, typical incentives usually that are offered for people to motivate people to participate, are like raffles or entering a lottery or something like that. But I guess in this context of Alzheimer's disease, and a disease where patients and their families are desperate for a treatment, I believe that the greatest motivation is really your hope to get better and to improve. So I think that's more motivating than anything you could offer, anything else.
I understand that, but you may still, if you let it, if you just let it come out of the population, you may end up with a disparity, because that's how disparities exist in clinical trials. So it's something that.
Bernard.
That's a great question. So there are levels to this. The first level is that literature has shown that a lot of patients adopt treatment strategies that are recommended to them by their physicians. They have some trust in them. So in the development of the app and the deployment, we're going to engage the physicians, and they are actually going to lead to helping patients enroll. So that is one level of motivation. Secondly, patients that are provided a lot of information are more likely to participate in such programs. And therefore, the app will have a feature that will have a messaging feature that can send message. So based on who is assessing it, if the doctor says that based on your information, you are having a particular issue, there will be a platform that information can be communicated to the patient. So there is going to be that iteration of communication, and that in itself will boost patients' confidence in enrolling in the app.
Are you considering any data security aspects of the app in your long-term goals?
Absolutely. So the plan is we have the choice to store the data in cloud, and then we also can do that on a server. We have chosen the server approach, which will be situated with the American Alzheimer's Association, and we're going to make sure that we comply with all the HIPAA regulations and make sure access to data will be strictly controlled.
This is particular for Alzheimer's. I was wondering, how can you make sure the Alzheimer's patient can really react in time if they still remember? So is there any way to remind them in terms of more interactive?
Thank you so much for that question. So that's why we have the component of caregivers. So the caregivers could be maybe their daughter, or someone close to them who knows them and who can help us navigate through to know if cognition has improved or not, because they stay with them, they understand them and things like that. That's one way to help us know if cognition is improved or not.
And one other keynote is that this questionnaire is validated in a way that either caregivers or patients can fill them. And another thing to bear in mind is that this drug is only approved for early Alzheimer's disease. So if we're talking about more advanced stages, that would be a major limitation. But I think given the early nature of or context at which this drug was approved, I think this makes it easier for us to, collect data from patients or caregivers. But that's a great question. Thank you for raising it.
Okay. Let me. We got to cut.
Okay.
So thanks so much. I think. Thanks. In the interest of keeping on track, we have a reception afterwards. I actually have a few questions. I think everybody can follow up and ask some more questions for these teams. That's an excellent opportunity for that dialogue. The third place team is NoCRX, Mihak Munir, Aruba Ali, Nana Isabre, and Naila Munir. Come on up. Yeah, congrats.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are Team NoCRX, and today we'll be talking about an age-friendly app that we're seeking to design, basically as a way to look at drug-drug interactions between current prescriptions that a patient may be using and over-the-counter analgesics. And the target population for this app is the geriatric population in the US. Next slide, please. So this is our team. My name is Aruba.
My name is Mehek.
I'm Neha Manir.
And I'm Nana Bray.
And we are all first-year pharmacy students at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. Next slide, please. So just to provide a brief overview, we'll first provide some background information related to our topic. We'll then talk about some of the problems that have motivated our research. We'll next present the solution, which is the app. And lastly, we'll talk about the impact that some of the features of the app will have on and basically enhancing health outcomes within the geriatric population, but also enhancing the use of health information technology within this population. Next slide, please. So just first to the background and problem. Next slide. So based on data derived in 2021, about 13% of the US population was represented by those aged 65 and up. As you can see in this pie chart, this is a small proportion compared to the rest of the population. However, when we're talking about OTC sales, 30% of all OTC sales were attributed to the geriatric population. So basically this indicates a high prevalence, high use of OTC medications within the aging population here. Another very important point to consider when talking about medication use among elderly individuals, it is the increasing risk of polypharmacy. So according to the National Institutes of Aging, polypharmacy refers to the use of multiple prescriptions simultaneously to treat certain health conditions. Concurrent OTC use will further complicate the issue of polypharmacy, leading to drug-drug interactions and adverse drug events that can often go unnoticed. So for example, when a prescription medication is called into a pharmacy, usually the pharmacist has the ability to detect any drug interactions. There'll be a pop-up that'll basically tell them, be careful, the patient's taking this drug, there might be an interaction. That's not the case with OTC medications. Usually the patient will kind of just go into a pharmacy, whatever they think they need, they will grab it. There's no way of knowing whether there will be an interaction, which can lead to adverse toxicities that are important to address. Next slide, please. So just to further illustrate the toxicities associated with drug-drug interactions, an article presented in the Expert Opinion on Drug Safety Medical Journal showed that those using 5 or more prescriptions had an 88% increased risk of developing an adverse drug event. Next slide, please. And more than 50% of those adverse events were actually associated with OTC use, like analgesics. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering, why are we focusing specifically on analgesics? OTCs include a wide variety of medications. It's mainly because substantial daily pain has been reported as one of the most common daily symptoms in about 60% of independent and 80% of long-term care geriatric patients. Also, OTC analgesics have consistently ranked among the top 10 most commonly used OTC medications in the US. These include examples like ibuprofen, acetaminophen, and naproxen and aspirin. Next slide, please. And then this is just a graph further illustrating the increase in OTC analgesic sales in the US, further justifying why we wanted to focus on this specific topic in this specific population. Next slide.
Now we are going to present the solution. Next slide, please. Patients cannot determine on their own if there is a drug-drug interaction. That is why we want to introduce a free, age-friendly app that can help patients to decide which OTC analgesic is best for them by checking drug-drug interaction between their current medications and OTC analgesics. Next slide, please. Next point, please. How does the app work? The very first step is to create an account in a few simple steps. Name and date of birth are all needed. Next point, please. Then the patient can add their current prescription medications using an image scanner found within the app or using drop-down menu. Next point, please. Patients can also add health conditions, but it is an optional step because we want to keep it as simple as possible for geriatric population. Next point, please. The patient can then scan the barcode found on the OTC analgesic. Next point, please. The app will check for any possible drug-drug interaction with the severity level. Next point, please. Depending on the severity, a message prompt will help guide the patient on what to do next. Next slide, please. Let's take a journal example. Next point, please. A patient is currently taking sertraline. Next point, please. One day the patient starts to have a body ache. They go to their local pharmacy to buy an OTC analgesic. There they see acetaminophen and ibuprofen. Both are pain relievers, which OTC analgesic is comparatively safer for them to take with sertraline. In this case, acetaminophen is comparatively safe. But why? Next slide, please. According to Micromedics, there is a severe drug-drug interaction between ibuprofen and sertraline that may require medical intervention to prevent or minimize serious side effects. Taking ibuprofen and sertraline together may increase the risk of bleeding, and this interaction is more likely to take place in elderly population. Next slide, please.
So for instances, when our app has already identified drug-drug interaction, what if our user still has questions about their next step? What if they still don't know what to do? We suggest every time this happens, a pop-up prompt, chat with your pharmacist, connects them or redirects them to the online platform of their preferred pharmacy or the closest pharmacy so that they could get their medication questions answered right away. Next slide, please. Some of the age-friendly features we wanted to incorporate into our app. The first one was text-to-speech tool, which is an example of assistive technology that would read digital text aloud. The adjustable volume could help with the auditory decline, and this could also help people with the vision decline. We also wanted to add the font tool that would allow adjustments to the color, size, and contrast of the font, as people over the age of 40 are more likely to experience presbyopia or farsightedness, which makes reading small text challenging. Next slide, please. We also wanted to focus on making the health content of our app as easy to follow as possible. According to NIH, the average recommended health content reading level should be 6th to 7th grade reading level, which is often not met in online health content. On addition, the patient package inserts are also written at the 10th grade reading level. Consequently, more than 500,000 Americans misinterpret their prescription labels every year. We wanted to make sure that the content of our app is as easy to follow as possible, and we suggest using, next slide please, suggest using Flash Reading Ease Score and Flash Kincaid grade level equations to thoroughly assess the ease of our content.
Next slide, please. So now to the impact of the features that we'll be using in our app. Next slide, please. So with the use of the Flash Kincaid grade, which uses short sentences and simple words, will make it easy for users to understand and follow the prompts. Also, with the use of barcoding, that gives you the option to scan the barcode of OTC medications, as well as the drop-down menu, enhances the accuracy of comparing and selecting the right drug while reducing the time and effort to do so. With the online medication list, patients who have access to their medications can keep it up to date and then even discuss it with their doctors. As patients are aware of what is being prescribed and what they're taking, a patient-initiated medication reconciliation is likely to be more accurate. Next slide. So in summary, we're using modern technology to enable older adults make safer choices of OTC analgesics and encourage health information technology by proposing NoCRX, which is an age-friendly app that detects drug-drug interactions between OTC analgesics and prescription medications. On this note, we would like to say thank you to our mentors, Dr. Polly, Dr. Ismail right here, and Dr. Pai for their support throughout the process. Thank you for listening. We'll be happy to answer any questions. Next slide. Oh.
Maybe time for one question. In the back.
Question about supplements. One of your slides, I think, suggested you were going to be doing drug supplement interactions also. Is that right?
So herbal supplements, yes. So along with the OTC medications, herbal supplements, we kind of kept it optional because again, we don't really want to complicate this any further. So a lot of patients might confuse, the use of herbal supplements with any of their other medications. So we kind of we kept it to be the OTC analgesics that they use. Herbal supplements are kind of included in the patient history. So it's kind of another way to enhance their consultation with their pharmacist as well. So in the app, if they see, oh, there's a suggestion for like supplementations, or if there's any other thing, it also promotes pharmacist consultation that they can have later on.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. That's great job. Actually, I have a question for your two teams, apps. Are you guys app savvy, or do you need help with app development? Okay, so maybe that's something Jim and I need to talk about, because we have some app savvy folks in College Park. Joan's next, so thanks.
Students you could connect from like computer science or something, right? Even a public health project.
We'll see you next year.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you. I'm so excited to be back in person and able to bring our details about our 10th annual America's Got Regulatory Science Talent Student Competition, which we held this year in Rochester. We, talk it up to other schools. I'm so happy with this partnership that we have with Maryland. And we do try to get, other people interested in it. We have had a group from Buffalo working with some Rochester folks on an NIH FDA funded project, a Center for Research on Flavored Tobacco. And they actually did have a tobacco regulatory science student competition. So we're glad that we're able to sort of get it out there. And to that end, we have even worked to create a guide for anyone who is interested in bringing a student competition to their institution. So any of the other CERSIs or any of the future funded ones, we're happy to share that with anyone who would like it. It kind of walks you through from 6 months ahead, what do you do, advertising, all the preparation for putting on a successful student competition. So we encourage people to check in with us if they'd like to talk about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this was our program from this year. We were excited to have 9 teams actually presenting at our student competition. The teams were provided a link to the 2022 focus areas of regulatory science. And from those 4 focus areas, we covered a lot of ground, from preparedness for emerging diseases to reducing our reliance on animal testing and things like individualized therapies. So we certainly did cover quite a few of the areas in of the focus areas of regulatory science. Next slide, please. Our judges this year were a great panel. We had Dr. Bowen, who is ex-FDA. He had actually worked as part of Team Biologics in CBER for several years before moving to ORA. I spent several years there during COVID and is now a consultant in Rochester. We had Dr. Heather Reyes from the University of Rochester. She co-leads the UR Health Lab and is involved in digital health and informatics education. And so this type of project is really close to her heart. And finally, I love it when we do around Rochester collaborations. We have Dr. Jenny Zhang from RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and her work emphasizes integration of robotics, machine learning, and psychology with a focus on human-machine interactions. So they actually had a very fun time at the competition, hearing the projects and enjoying what the students had to talk about. Then I would like to also thank our regulatory advisors. So we had one team who had their ideas formulated early enough for Tracy to work on securing a FDA advisor for them. And Dr. Ryan Ortega and Dr. Kim Schultz were available to provide insight to the team, help the student think about what they were designing. It was a medical device that tested personalized cell therapy product, and we appreciate that. And we have plans to get a little bit more of the projects done earlier on, so we can take advantage of the wealth of knowledge that we have within the FDA advisors in future years. Next slide, please. Okay, and with that, I am going to talk about our winning teams. I will start with our third place team because we only brought down our winning team. So I'll start with third place, and that was Melanie Singh. She proposed a system that would use AI to predict drug shortages, bringing together data from drug manufacturers, wholesalers, pharmacies to predict if supply would be able to meet demand. Melanie is a PhD student in biomedical engineering. Our second place team is Rachel Nahari and Stella Nantal. They developed a biometric drug dispenser to keep patients' opioid drugs in a format that was secure, but still allowing for direct access. Rachel and Stella are both pursuing their masters at the University of Rochester in the Center for Medical Technology and Innovation. And then that leads me to our winning team, who will be presenting now. I will just give a touch of background because you will hear all of their details. Dan Farchione is from Rochester, New York, and he is getting his master's in the Center for Medical and Technology Innovation. And Justin Jablonski is from Buffalo, New York, and he is a PhD student in biomedical engineering. And I will turn it over to Dan and Justin.
Well, before she gets the slides up, I just want to say thank you guys for coming today, and it's an honor to be here presenting, and thanks for the quick introduction. But yeah, so our solution, Food Trace AI, is focused on rapidly tracing foodborne illness outbreaks. And I am Dan Farchione, my partner Justin. And so without further ado, we'll get started. And so I just want to start off with a brief look at what our food distribution network looks like today. Unfortunately, this is actually a simplified version of that map because we don't take into account international food shipments, importing, exporting, things like that. And it's interesting to see that all those blue lines represent one stage in the supply chain process, whether it be farmers shipping their product to processing plants or distributors shipping their process or their food to the final destination, whether it be restaurants or stores. And what's interesting about this is there are over 9.5 million blue lines that make up that image to the right there. So yeah, and that's when it's compressed too. So it's even more in depth too. And next slide, please. And so these blue lines are made up of pretty much this image right here, the food supply chain. And as you look towards the outside of that chain, it's broken up into several different groups, whether it be political, environmental, socioeconomic, or there's a few other ones in there. But within this very complex image, there are three things that make up this image that we found to be limitations to the current food supply chain. The first of which being insufficient traceability protocols. And so these can end up creating blind spots and unnecessary risks within the food chain. And this is often due to companies or suppliers using outdated inventory management software, which probably isn't suitable for today's volume of food that's being processed and distributed. And then secondly, pressure to produce by pretty much all stages of the food supply chain, whether it be the farmers or the distributors. And this can end up leading to decreased food safety and quality, and often is due to a lack of packaging and storage solutions. A lot of times companies will end up doing this just because it's the cheaper option and it, gives them that higher profit margin. And then lastly, lack of communication. And then so oftentimes, since there's so many different moving pieces, information gets fragmented a lot of times. And so this can end up leading to food waste and mishandling. Next slide, please. And so the FDA is currently managing this through the CORE network, or the Coordinated Outbreak Response and Evaluation Team. And so this team was formed in 2011, and they currently track emerging disease outbreak trends using data that's collected from the CFSAN Adverse Events Reporting System, PulseNet, et cetera. And I have a few more listed up there. And then so when a response team is called and they find an outbreak worth pursuing, they will contact the local authorities, sometimes the state, and they also work hand in hand with the CDC and other FDA field offices in the area to develop a response strategy. And this response strategy is often created that takes into account data that's been collected from past foodborne illness outbreaks and food pairings, or they also will go out and do their own inspections and investigations related to product sampling and product distribution tracking. And this information is often used in the future that they'll go back to use these as ways to prevent any other outbreaks that may result from current practices. Next slide, please. And so developing a solution to this, you first have to start with how do you address an outbreak. We found three key steps in this process. First of which is fairly straightforward, identifying the actual outbreak. And you have to correlate these reports in order to localize the outbreak. So for example, we have to make sure that there's an actual chance for an outbreak occurring as opposed to maybe somebody just had a bad allergic reaction to a food, or maybe a restaurant didn't cook somebody's meat properly or didn't cook it well enough. And then secondly, actually confirming of the food source. And so we have to contact distributors, food manufacturers, and consumers too, to identify possible sources of that outbreak and really pinpoint where that outbreak started. And then shortly following up with that, we have to trace the contaminated food as well. We have to know the exact route that food took to get to where it is that's causing people to get sick, and to also look at maybe other places that it could have went as well. And next slide, please. And so to kind of capitalize on the magnitude of this problem, since 2011, when the core team was created, they've identified almost 1,000 outbreaks, which is impressive. However, the CDC estimates that there are about 800 foodborne disease outbreaks yearly. And so having a way to collect data faster, correlate that data faster, and be able to analyze it efficiently could definitely enhance the way we address outbreaks today. And then I will now, next, yep. And so our solution, Food Trace AI, is going to focus on 2 regulatory science areas: public health and preparedness and response, which involves continuous surveillance, and then secondly, unleashing the power of data, utilizing AI and machine learning to aid in this process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin, who will actually talk about our solution.
Next slide. So our solution is Food Trace AI. This would be an AI that's developed to identify, trace, and sort of predict outbreaks that occur in the food supply. The way this AI would work is basically that would take in various forms of data related to possible food poisoning. Next slide. It would implement various deep learning algorithms to not only identify and confirm that those reports are actually related to food poisoning cases, but also to begin to correlate reports based on location, time, and other factors. Next slide. It would analyze these reports with further correlation and sort of checking against other factors to determine an actual report it can provide to the FDA. Next slide. And then they would have this output risk per report that would suggest sort of what areas are at risk of, this could be a likely food source, this could be a likely area of contamination, and sort of identifying where the contamination occurred, how it would have spread, and what may be affected. So AI has shown a lot of capabilities in this area. In use of sort of web scraping, data analysis, and pattern predictions, AI has been widely used in areas from tracking COVID-19 outbreaks to areas like electrical demand and rainfall patterns. This has been taken further into early warning systems where the AI is not only able to analyze and correlate data, but also determine sort of thresholds at which to warn people and send out further information, which has been used in health deterioration in hospitals and flood and fire alert systems. And AI has also shown capabilities for human-level interactions. AI-run interviews are actually a recent trend that have been occurring where an AI automates the entire interview process. And there have also been a recent case of an AI actually hiring and managing an individual to perform tasks for the AI. This human-level interaction will help a lot with the AI in gathering data for analyzing of these possible outbreak spreads. Thank you. So the way the Food Trace AI would work is basically you'd have some initial reports that are detected during sort of passive web scraping. These could be social media reports, restaurant comments, or news articles suggesting food poisoning, E. coli, or some other trigger word that would suggest related to a food poisoning outbreak. After a certain number of reports or a certain quality of report is hit, a sort of threshold can be triggered, at which point the AI begins to more actively investigate this area. The AI would be able to send out information to these providers, much in the same way that the core team works now with interviews, where it could sort of contact social media accounts or news stations with these automated surveys to ask for more information about the possible outbreak, what foods could be related, what's the precise time or precise location it occurred. And by gathering this further data, it can better correlate different reports. Next slide. The AI would also reach out to distributors like the restaurant, the manufacturers of food, and try and get distribution reports from those, as well as web scraping for any other information available on the distribution to build a network of where the food came from, where it was spread to, other places that might also have potentially contaminated food. And then the FDA and CDC would also be able to input data directly into this AI as they collect data on the ground, such as confirming or denying that this food is or isn't contaminated, this location does or doesn't have contaminated food, and other information that would help refine the AI's predictions. Next slide. And then the AI would output a prediction report with identified risks of different factors. The risks would include such as like which foods are at the highest risk of being contaminated, where the contamination most likely started, where it's most likely to have spread in other areas that are at high risk of having contaminated food that they could be passing on to the general public. So this food trace brings much faster analysis and correlation of all this different reports, so that you don't have to have field individuals going out and constantly scraping the web to find this information, going out and gathering all these interviews. This AI will do it all at once, much faster. Same with that contacting. You can contact more individuals, and you can contact individuals much faster if you're using an automated interview process than if you're using individuals having to go out and manually interview individuals. And you also have sort of a risk modeling aspect to this, where it can model the probabilities of the distribution and contamination patterns to help the FDA focus their efforts on where they need to most investigate, which locations, which food sources, to more quickly find the cause of the outbreak. There are a few limitations with this device at the moment. For one, because this is an automated online system, this would require FDA field confirmation of all the results. It wouldn't be able to output like this food is definitively the cause of an outbreak. It would say 95% chance it's from this food, and then someone would have to go test it and confirm, okay, either the AI is right or the AI is wrong. We have to edit it for future steps. In addition, this AI would not have access to medical data reports, at least initially, because we wouldn't want a web scraping AI to break into any sort of secure medical systems. We wouldn't have access to those reports, but that would also lead us to having a very low sort of overall reporting table, because you'd be missing all the reports of patients going to a provider and saying, okay, I'm having food poisoning, I'm having an upset stomach. And so that would sort of limit our initial data pool. However, in future steps, this AI could partner with healthcare providers to get secure access to that data, giving it a wider pool of data to better identify and correlate outbreaks of food poisoning. And in addition, this AI could partner with industry to get much more comprehensive lists of distribution chains and supply networks. Finally, this AI can also begin to incorporate additional data such as weather and geography to help predict upcoming outbreaks that could occur in the future, such as at a certain time of year, maybe there's a higher risk of an outbreak in this food supply, or proximity of these two locations leads to a higher risk of E. coli contaminating a vegetable or some other source. Thank you. Any questions?
We definitely have time for, Dr. Morrison.
Really exciting. I'm a very early adopter of ChatGPT, so I'm very interested in language models. But on my personal time, not as an FDA employee, clear. I'm curious about, it's interesting we think about building these kinds of systems to provide benefits, speed things up, but in thinking about could you do a comparison, or did you think about like the timeline it takes right now to detect that something is an outbreak, for people to confirm that it's an outbreak, and then to share that information with the population as compared to what a tool like this might do? Like, how do you communicate, the ROI on investing in something like this? Where does that ROI really lie?
So in the very initial stages where you're first getting data incoming suggesting there may be an outbreak, the timeline would probably be about the same. It'd probably be a week or two of reports before you're able to say, okay, there's enough reports that an outbreak occurred. But after that point, once the FDA's core team has to go out and send out individuals to manually identify and interview people, or to manually test facilities, this will shorten the process dramatically at that point, because it'll give you, like right off the bat, it can give you predictions of, okay, test these facilities first. We're already gathering interviews for you, so you don't have to send a team out. And so in those aspects, if it can help direct the FDA to a specific facility first, it could save days or weeks where they don't have to test other facilities in the meantime, looking for that key sort of aspect of the food poisoning outbreak.
I was wondering, if you had any thoughts about what you might use as like a training data set to train the AI, in particular around that decision point that goes from passive surveillance to active investigation?
Yeah, so the core team, like we talked about earlier, actually, the FDA keeps track of everything. So we would probably initially start the AI using past data that was collected by the core team, whether it be product sampling or distribution patterns that they've collected, that the core team has actually collected. And then we'd probably use that as like a very small training data set to start off with, and then end up, sort of expanding that to maybe other outbreaks that have occurred or, things like that.
In addition, with the field confirmation testing that's sort of required here, it would help the AI train itself as well. Because if you're able to field test and say, okay, you predicted this, but it was actually, say, your third prediction, not your first one, the AI can use that data for sort of future predictions and continuously modify itself for better predictive skill. I believe a lot of the networks that I mentioned are adaptive predictive networks, where as you're continuously using it, it is improving itself.
Next question, we're good? Oh,
well. Are you guys connected with folks in the food group?
I can't say we have.
We have an AI expert on our team who could help make that connection for you guys.
Follow up, definitely.
See if there's anything viable here.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if we could take that one step further.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm closing up. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and thank you to our remote attendees as well. So nice to return to being in person, to meet the other teams, to meet our FDA advisors. Congratulations to our 4 winning teams who are able to come here and be able to present. I hope this has provided everyone with some new and interesting, exciting regulatory science ideas to contemplate. From the short-term regulation of LDTs through incorporation of patient-reported outcomes, all the way to contraindicated drug-drug interactions and protecting our food supply. I think we had a lot of really good ideas. Actually, the one take-home that was mentioned from Dr. Blumpus that I think is really important to us is the idea of combating misinformation and disinformation by being active ambassadors of good science. You all have this platform. Maybe it's a small platform that you have now, but as scientists, your platform will grow. And I think it's all our responsibility to use that wisely. So thank you, and you should be proud of yourself.
Yeah, really. Thanks again, you guys, traveling this far, coming this way to spend some time with us. So we do have a reception for you all. We have pizza with meat and pizza without meat. We have a lot more vegetarians in our group. So please help yourself. Again, a special thank you to Tracy. And I did not realize that LaToya was going to be working the systems today. So I would definitely like to take a moment to thank her and the rest of the ORSI team for helping out today. Thank you all so very much, and look forward to talking with you over some snacks.
Yeah, it's like one thing.